Single dad Ethan Cole never expected the most powerful woman in the building to look at him with tears in her eyes and whisper a request that would pull him into a world he didn't belong in. But that's exactly what happened the night he walked in on his millionaire boss crying behind closed doors. The office was nearly empty when it began, the kind of quiet that only settles in after long hours and longer expectations. When the cleaning crew moves like shadows and the glow of computer screens feels louder than conversation. Ethan had stayed late, not because he wanted to, but because staying meant overtime, and overtime meant keeping things steady at home for his son, Caleb, who was 7 and already asking questions Ethan didn't always know how to answer. Life had become a careful balancing act since his wife passed 3 years ago, one part survival, one part pretending everything was okay. So he kept his head down, did his job well, and avoided attention, especially from people like Victoria Hale, the company's CEO, a woman whose reputation traveled faster than she did. She was known for being brilliant, decisive, and completely untouchable, the kind of leader who didn't tolerate mistakes and certainly didn't show weakness. Ethan had seen her in meetings, sharp, composed, always in control, and if there was one thing everyone agreed on, it was that Victoria Hale didn't break. Which is why, when Ethan stepped out of the analytics department and walked toward the elevators, something fell off. A light was still on in the executive wing. That alone wasn't unusual, but what stopped him wasn't the light. It was the sound. Soft at first, almost mistaken for the hum of ventilation, but unmistakable once he paused. Someone was crying. He hesitated, every instinct telling him to turn around, to respect boundaries that people like him weren't meant to cross. But something about it pulled him forward, slow steps across polished floors until he reached the glass walls of her office. And that's when he saw her. Victoria Hale, sitting on the floor beside her desk, her back against the polished wood, shoulders shaking in a way that didn't belong to the version of her the world knew. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, had come loose, and her face, what he could see of it, was buried in her hands. Ethan froze. This wasn't something he was supposed to witness. This was the kind of moment that could cost him his job just for being there. He should have left. He knew that. But then the floor creaked beneath his weight, just slightly, just enough. And she looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. For a moment, neither of them moved. The distance between CEO and employee, power and anonymity, collapsed into something human and uncomfortable and real. Ethan opened his mouth to apologize, to say he hadn't seen anything, but the words never came. Because instead of anger, instead of cold dismissal, she did something unexpected. She stood, slowly, like the effort mattered, and walked to the door. When she opened it, the air between them felt different, heavier. Up close, the signs were impossible to miss. Her eyes red, her expression strained, like she was holding something together that was already falling apart. Ethan stepped back instinctively. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, already preparing to leave. "I didn't mean to, wait." Her voice stopped him. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. There was something in it that made him stay. He turned back, unsure, watching as she took a breath like she was steadying herself for something far more difficult than any boardroom negotiation. For a second, she looked like she might change her mind, like she might retreat behind the version of herself the world expected. But she didn't. Instead, she met his eyes again, and when she spoke, it wasn't as his boss. It was just her. "I need your help," she said quietly. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. With what? She hesitated, just long enough for him to realize how unusual this was, how deliberate the choice must have been. Out of everyone in the building, she was asking him, not her executives, not her assistants. Him. "I need you to come with me somewhere tonight," she continued, her voice steadier now, but still carrying something fragile underneath. Ethan frowned slightly, confusion settling in. "Tonight?" "Yes." She glanced at the clock, then back at him. "It's important." He should have said no. Every logical part of him knew that stepping into his boss's personal life, especially like this, was a line you didn't cross if you wanted to keep things simple. But nothing about this felt simple. Not the way she was looking at him, not the fact that she had let him see her like this, not the quiet urgency behind her words. "Why me?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. For a moment, she didn't answer. She just studied him, like she was measuring something he couldn't see. Then she said, Because you won't make it complicated. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That depends on what you're asking. A faint, almost tired hint of a smile touched her lips, gone as quickly as it appeared. I need you to pretend, she said. Just for a few hours. He felt his chest tighten slightly. Pretend what? And that's when she said it, the words landing heavier than anything else that night. That you're someone important to me. Silence followed, thick and immediate. Ethan stared at her, trying to process what he'd just heard. This wasn't a work request. This wasn't anything he had prepared for. You want me to lie? He said slowly. I want you to help me, she corrected. But there was no edge in her tone, just honesty. There's a difference. He shook his head slightly, half in disbelief, half trying to ground himself. I don't even know where we're going. A family event, she replied. Something I can't avoid. That explained the tension, but not the request. And you need what? A date. Someone they'll believe, she said, more quietly now. Someone real. The irony wasn't lost on him. She was asking for something fake to feel real. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts immediately jumping to Caleb, to the responsibility waiting for him at home, to the life he'd built carefully after everything fell apart. He didn't do impulsive anymore. He didn't take risks like this. But then he looked at her again, really looked this time, and saw past the title, past the wealth, past the reputation. He saw someone who, for whatever reason, had run out of options. Just tonight, he asked. Just tonight, she confirmed. Another pause. Then, softer, almost like she wasn't used to saying it, please. That word did it. Not because of what it meant, but because of how rare it sounded coming from someone like her. Ethan exhaled slowly, the decision settling in before he could overthink it. Okay, he said. I'll help. And just like that, something shifted, something neither of them fully understood yet, but something that would change far more than just one night. Ethan had agreed to help for one night, nothing more, but the moment he stepped into her world, he realized nothing about this would stay simple. Within the hour, he was back in his apartment staring at a suit far too expensive for his life, delivered without explanation and tailored to fit perfectly. Like this had all been planned long before she ever asked him. His phone buzzed, Aster's car downstairs. 10 minutes. Asterisk no space to think, no time to back out. He got dressed, pausing only briefly at the photo of his son before heading out into the night. The car waiting for him was sleek and silent, and inside, Victoria looked like she had rebuilt herself entirely, composed, elegant, untouchable again, but her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, gave her away. We met 3 months ago, she said as he sat beside her. Keep it simple. You work with me. For you, he corrected quietly. She glanced at him. With me, she repeated, firmer. And tonight, you're someone I chose. The words settled heavier than expected as the car pulled up to a grand hotel, glowing with quiet wealth. Inside, everything felt different. Polished floors, low voices, and eyes that noticed everything. The moment they walked in together, Ethan felt it. Attention shifting, conversations dipping, judgment forming before anyone spoke. Victoria's hand slipped into his. Stay close, she murmured. He did. They were quickly approached by a woman who carried authority without raising her voice. Victoria's mother. Her gaze moved over Ethan with quiet scrutiny, her questions precise and calculated. Where he came from, what he did, how he fit into a life like this. Ethan answered honestly, steady and unshaken, and somehow that seemed to unsettle her more than anything else. The tension barely faded before someone else arrived, someone who changed everything. Victoria. The voice was smooth, familiar, and instantly, her posture stiffened. Ethan turned and saw a man who looked like he belonged in this world effortlessly, confident, polished, and far too comfortable. Her ex. It was obvious in the way she looked at him, controlled but guarded. Didn't expect this, the man said, glancing at Ethan. You always said you didn't have time for relationships. Victoria didn't flinch. People change. Or they pretend to. He replied lightly, though the words carried weight. Ethan stayed quiet, but he didn't let go of her hand. That alone seemed to matter. When the man finally walked away, the air felt heavier, like something unresolved had just been stirred up. I need some air, Victoria said, already turning toward the terrace. Ethan followed her outside, where the cold night wrapped around them and the noise faded into the background. She moved straight to the railing, gripping it tightly, her composure cracking just enough to see through again. "He's not wrong," she said quietly. Ethan frowned. "About what?" She hesitated. "About me. I don't do this. I don't let people in." He stepped a little closer. "Then why am I here?" That question stopped her. For a moment, she said nothing, like the answer wasn't easy, or maybe it was too simple. "Because I didn't want to walk in there alone," she admitted finally. No performance, no control, just truth. Ethan let that settle before speaking. "You wouldn't have been alone." She shook her head. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her expression shifted again. That same vulnerability he had seen earlier breaking through. "They think I'm incapable," she said softly, "of needing anyone, of being anything other than what I've built." Ethan held her gaze. "And are they right?" A long pause followed, the kind that said more than words. "I don't know," she admitted. And standing there in the cold, with the world she controlled waiting just behind those doors, Ethan realized this wasn't just a favor anymore. The line between pretending and something real had already started to blur, and neither of them knew how far it would go. Ethan thought the night would end once they returned inside, but the real turning point came when Victoria stopped pretending altogether. As they stepped back into the ballroom, the whispers and watchful eyes returned, but this time, she didn't let go of his hand. When her ex approached again, calm and confident, he tried one last time to pull her back into the version of her he understood. "This isn't you," he said quietly. But Victoria didn't hesitate. "It is now." The simplicity of it caught everyone off guard, including Ethan. There was no performance left, no carefully constructed image, just a choice. Her ex studied her for a moment, then nodded slightly, like he finally understood he had lost something he could never get back. "Then I don't know you anymore," he said. "No," she replied softly. "You don't." And with that, it ended. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. She turned away from him without looking back and faced Ethan instead. "Let's go," she said. He nodded, and together they walked out, leaving behind the noise, the expectations, and the world she had spent years trying to control. Outside, the quiet night air wrapped around them, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she looked at him, her voice softer than before. "What happens now?" Ethan exhaled lightly. "We don't have to figure that out tonight." She held his gaze, searching for certainty, but finding something better, honesty. "Good," she said, "because I don't want this to end here." That was the real request. Not the one she made in her office, but this one. Simple, unguarded, real. Ethan understood the risk, the uncertainty, how different their lives were. But he also knew what it meant to walk away from something that mattered. "Then it won't," he said. "No grand promises, just truth." She stepped a little closer, no walls, no distance, just herself. "I'm not used to this," she admitted. "Not being in control." Ethan gave a small smile. "Yeah," he said. "Me neither." She let out a quiet laugh, and for the first time that night, it felt light. Something had shifted, not just between them, but within her. For once, she wasn't choosing control or perfection. She was choosing something uncertain, something real. And as she reached for his hand again, not for show, but because she wanted to, Ethan didn't hesitate. The future wasn't clear, but it didn't need to be. Because this time, she wasn't facing it alone.